Hey guys, so in this video we're going to talk about how to factor a trinomial that looks like this. And the thing that we're focusing on is trinomials that do not have a leading coefficient of 1. So I just want to really quickly kind of review the techniques that I use in my particular videos, and you can kind of review all of those. I'll drop links to those in the description. So these are the types of polynomials I've dealt with in previous videos, and these have a leading coefficient of 1, so they're just x squared. Notice in this video we're dealing with this ax squared, so a is going to be a number that's other than 1, and I've built up a bunch of videos that just use 1 here, and I've talked about using the trial and error method. And so in doing that, the way that I like to work this is, so all I do is I focus on the first and the last term. Now, to get to x squared, that would just be x times x. And then to get to 12, so you can really just make any guess that you want that would get you to 12 and see if that gets you the middle term. Now, I will mention that when you have a leading coefficient of 1 like we do here, you can actually make this a little bit easier on yourself. So you can think about all the different ways that you can multiply to get to 12. So like 1 times 12, 3 times 4, 2 times 6. So those are all the different ways you could multiply to get to 12. And you can make this a little bit easier on yourself by thinking of when you add these factors together, which one will give you 7. So that would be 3 and 4. So then I could just write 3 and 4, and it kind of makes it so that I don't have to do so much guess and check. And if I wanted to check this, so I've talked about this in other videos, so x times x is x squared, 3 times 4 is 12, and so to get that middle term, I take 3x times 4x, so I can see that that does give me 7x. And so I've built this up in a lot of different videos. I've even looked at it in different ways, like in this way where I have 2 variables. And this is still kind of the same idea, so it's still going to be x and x to get the party started, and then you think about what 2 things would multiply to negative 10, but add to negative 3. So that would be negative 5 and positive 2, except then you would just tack a y onto them to get that middle term. So these are all things that I've talked about in previous videos. So hopefully at this point you feel kind of comfortable with this. If this is new to you, you might want to go back and watch some of those other videos before you jump into this, because this is going to get a little bit harder. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to use trial and error and also grouping to work with trinomials that look like this, because these are a lot harder. Because unlike in these types of examples where I can just think about kind of these types of pairs and adding up, you know, these factors, that doesn't work quite as well here. But I will tell you that trial and error, so I like trial and error because it's the easiest technique to learn. And then once you kind of get a little finesse for it, you kind of get better at guessing, I guess. So just like before, I just want to focus on the first and the last terms, and I'm still going to set up like my little set of binomials just like I normally would. And if I go about this, so I might say, okay, so what 2 things multiply now to give me 2x squared? Okay, well, the only way you can make 2x squared would be to do 2x and x. So it's still an x in each parenthesis, except now I've got a 2 here because there's, you know, obviously this number here. And then I think, okay, so what 2 things will multiply together to make 3? And so in this case, that would be, so just 1 and 3. But now here's where the caveat comes in. So if I multiply all of this back together, so this is going to give me 2x squared plus 6x plus x plus 3. So that is not the polynomial that we started with. And so this is where this gets a little bit tricky, because the 1 and the 3 now, where you put them is going to matter. So think about, why does this equal 7? Well, this equals 7 because the 2x bounced off of this 3, and it made a very large number kind of when we were multiplying everything together. So what that tells me is that I don't want the 3 bouncing off the 2. So I'm going to just cross out this attempt, and I'll try it one more time like this. So I'm just going to flip the 1 and the 3. And now let's try this one more time. So this is 2x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 3. And so that gives me what I need. So this is going to take a little bit more time in some ways for you to get used to it. But once you start kind of thinking through the details, it does get a lot faster. So I've talked about this in other videos, but I do like using trial and error because it's like the easiest one to remember. You just make a guess for the first term and the last term and you see if it works. And after you practice this enough time, you get some finesse. Now, the other thing I recommend if you are going to use trial and error is to force yourself just to remember what other guesses you tried, because sometimes when you do examples like this, you can go through a couple different guesses. Okay, so I want to try trial and error one more time before I show you a different method that you can use for this. So why don't you pause the video here and you think about this one and play around with it a little bit and see if you get it, and then hit play when you're ready. So once again, setting up my two binomials. So the things that will make 3x squared will be 3x and x. And then the things that will make 5 will be 5 and 1. But you have to actually take the moment to check it. Now, you can always check this in your head. So I can see I've got 3x squared, 5 times 1 is the 5. So really it's just the middle term. So I can see from this I'm going to get 5x plus 3x. So that's not going to be big enough. Now, if you can't do that in your head, you can always just do a quick little check. But I recommend trying to practice doing this kind of just on the fly like I showed you, because it will make you a lot faster. So try, as you practice this, just try to get a little quicker with it by seeing if you can eventually figure out how to do it in your head. So this didn't work. So that just tells me now I have to flip the 5 and the 1. And so if I were trying to get a bit stronger with this, so I would kind of know right away just by looking at this that this was maybe not the right guess, because to get this term of 16, that's a big number. So that kind of tells me I probably want to bounce something off of this 3x, like a larger number. So 3x times 5, that will give me 15, right? And then the 1x gives me the 16. So this is the answer. So that's how that works. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another way that you can approach these problems. And okay, let's just go through the whole technique here, and then we can discuss it. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to multiply the first and last coefficients. So in this case, that'll be 3 times 5, and so that will equal 15. And just to be clear, so first and last, so that's this and this. Okay, so the next thing that you want to do is now you want to think about what two numbers would multiply to this number here, but add to this number here. So let me write that down. So what two numbers will multiply to this answer here, but add to this? So how do I make 15 but add to 16? So if I take 1 times 15, that will add to 15, but 1 plus 15 will equal 16. Okay, so when you find those numbers, that is actually, we're going to leverage this answer to help us use some grouping. So let me clear some space. Okay, so now using this answer, we're going to rewrite this expression using these numbers. So let me write this down. So we want to rewrite the middle term using your answer to 2. So I've still got 3x squared, but now instead of this being 16x, I'm going to rewrite this as 15x plus 1x plus 5. Okay, so now what this is going to allow us to do is we can use grouping to finish this. So let me clear some space. And so I'll just note that we're going to use grouping now to finish the problem. And if you're not familiar with the grouping technique, I will drop a link to it in the description where I've done a whole video where I break the whole concept down. So to use grouping to finish, so the GCF in the first two terms will be 3x. So I'll go ahead and factor that out. So that leaves me with x plus 5. And then, well, there really is no GCF in the second two terms. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to just factor out a 1 so that I have a placeholder. And then I can rewrite this as x plus 5. And now you can see that I can totally group this. So this will factor as x plus 5 times 3x plus 1. So that's exactly what we got using our trial and error method, right? Except now we had a little bit more of like an algorithmic process to do this. So as far as which technique do you use, should you use grouping or should you use trial and error? Well, I think it's a little bit of personal preference. They both get you to the right answer. Some people really like using grouping for these harder problems because they feel like it saves them time. But a lot of times I find if students really just get used to using trial and error, they find that it's just as fast. So the thing with trial and error is that the steps are always the same. You just think about the first term and the last term, and you kind of make that guess and see how you do. With grouping, as you can see, we have to remember all of these steps. So it's really a matter of personal preference. Some people are going to like having kind of a process to do this, and other people are going to say, I'm not going to be able to remember all those steps on a test or whatever. So you figure out what's best for you. There's no wrong way to do this. Okay. So let's do a few more examples with this now. So I've got this first example here. So 7x squared minus 11x plus 4. So you can try this either way with grouping or with trial and error. Let's actually try both. So let's start by using trial and error. I think it's better to start there than you don't know what to guess. So maybe pause the video here and just go ahead and set up kind of those two binomials and see if you can figure this out, and hit play when you're ready. So as I figure this out, so the way I kind of think about this, you know you're going to have 7x and x, that's for sure. So then it's really for the 4, you could do this with either 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. And they're both going to have to be negative, right? Because this is positive and this is negative. So the thing is if I were to bounce, so if I were to bounce the 4 off of this 7, that would give me a really big number, right? 28. So that would be incorrect. And then maybe I think, okay, I'm going to use minus 2 and minus 2. So if you look at this, so what does this do for us? This gives us 7x squared minus 2x minus 14x plus 4. So you can see from here, this is going to give us negative 16, so that's still a little too big. So this guess won't work either, so I'll go ahead and just kind of cross that out. So the only other guess that would work then would be 7x minus 4 and x minus 1. So let's see, does this work? So this gives me 7x squared minus 7x minus 4x plus 4. And that does work. So that will give me 11x. So here's my answer. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this to the side. And now we'll do this again using grouping just to compare the two strategies. So let me clear some space. Okay, so first things first, I have to multiply the first and the last term together, or coefficient. So that's equal to 28. So now I'm thinking about what two numbers will multiply to 28 but add to negative 11. So now we at least can create like a little list for ourselves, right? So this would be like 4 and 7, and hey, we already found it, right? So these would just both have to be negative to get negative 11. So we'll just put a little negative sign there. So using these two numbers, now I want to break up this middle term. So I'm going to rewrite this expression as 7x squared. And it's really up to you if you want to write this as, if you want to write minus 7 or minus 4 here. There's no like right way that you have to do this. I'm just going to put the 7's together. So I'll call this 7x squared minus 7x minus 4x plus 4. And now I can use grouping. So out of these first two terms, I can factor out the 7x, and that's going to leave me with x minus 1. Now be careful in the second one. Out of the second two terms, I'm going to factor out negative 4, which is going to flip all the signs. So the first term becomes positive, and the second term becomes negative. And now I can see that I've got the same thing in both sets of parentheses. So this becomes 7x minus 4 and x minus 1. And hey, that's exactly what we found, right? So again, it's really just a matter of personal preference. And, you know, I would really encourage you to practice both techniques. I find that people can always remember trial and error. This technique might work when you're in a class at the time, but I would say that a lot of times I notice students, as they kind of go up in levels, they'll remember just using plain old trial and error. Some students do remember the grouping technique, but I think you just have to kind of continually practice it as you move along. Okay. So let's do this one more time, and then I've got a few more examples after this, but at least try this example just one more time to make sure you've got the basic idea. So once again, first try this using trial and error. You can pause the video here, hit play when you're ready. So let's see. So I'm going to have 3x and x. And then let's see, if I do this plus 2, so x plus 2, that's going to give me 6, right? So 3x times 2 is 6. And then this would have to be 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. This will give me 6x plus 4x, so that gives me 10x. So as you can see from trial and error, like once I kind of get used to playing around with this, I can make stronger guesses. But at the same time, I understand it can be a little frustrating just to have to sit there and guess a little bit. But what this does is it really builds up your numeracy skills, so it makes you really comfortable kind of working with numbers and kind of making those guesses. It's a great skill to have in math. So I'm going to go ahead and just note this on the side, and then we can clear some space. And now we can try using grouping again. So once again, I'll go ahead and just multiply. So 3 times 8 is 24. So now I want to find two numbers that multiply to 24 but add to 10. So let's see, if I think about that, so 24 could be like 2 times 12, that's not going to work, or 4 times 6, that will work, right? So now I can use these numbers to break up this whole expression. So this can become 3x squared, let's see, let's make it plus 4x plus 6x plus 8. So let's see what that does. So to do my grouping then, out of these first two terms, I'll factor out an x. So this becomes 3x plus 4. And then out of the second two terms, I can factor out a 2, which will leave me with 3x plus 4. And then I can finish the grouping as x plus 2 and 3x plus 4, which is exactly what we found in trial and error. So again, just tomato, tomato, whatever you prefer, it's totally fine. So to end this video, I have 3 more examples. So it's kind of up to you if you want to keep practicing some of this. So I have just another standard example. This one has an x and a y, and then this one has a negative in it. So if you're looking for more practice, you can pause the video here, try these 3 using either technique, and then hit play when you're ready. So starting with C here, so let's see, if I go trial and error, so I'm going to have the 5x and the x, and then let's see, this is negative 36, so let's see, I usually think of like 9 and 4, so what if we did minus 9 and plus 4? So if I do that, then I have 5x times 4, which is 20x, minus 9x. So this actually will give me a positive middle term. So just to kind of work that out for you guys. So this gives me 5x squared plus 20x minus 9x minus 36. So as you can see, this gives me a positive term. So I'm close. I just have to flip my signs. So if I make another guess, this will be 5x plus 9 and then x minus 4, and this one will definitely work, right? Because this will give me 5x squared minus 20x plus 9x minus 36. So we're good to go. Okay, now I'll show that one more time using grouping. So let's see, I'll write the answer here, 5x plus 9, x minus 4. So let me clear some space. Okay, so now multiplying 5 times negative 36, that's going to give me negative 180. So what two numbers will multiply to negative 180 but add to negative 11? So then I can kind of play around with this a little bit. And let's see, like negative 20 times 9 would work. So I already found it. So those two numbers will add to negative 11. So now I can break this up. So this will be 5x squared minus 20x plus 9x minus 36. So to group that, I can factor out the 5, so this will leave me with x minus 4. And then in the second two terms, I can factor out the 9, and this will leave me with x minus 4. So this factors as 5x plus 9 and x minus 4. Okay, and so in the interest of time here, so I'm going to skip over doing the trial and error since we now believe that we'll get the same answer, and I'll just kind of go the grouping method in case that's the method that you prefer. So let's see, if I do the first and the last term, so 3 times -6 is -18. So then thinking about what multiplies to -18 but adds to -17, that will be, let's see, -18, so that'll be -18 times +1, right? So -18 plus +1 will equal -17. So now I can break this up to 3x squared minus 18x. Oh, and sorry, so there is a little caveat here. So now it's not just x, right? It's xy. So how do you account for that? Well, you literally just use the middle term. So I'm just going to call this xy plus xy minus 6y squared. So don't let these like extra variables throw you off. You're just kind of adding them into the problem. So let's see how it works with grouping now. So as I group this together, so this I can factor out, let's see, 3x, so this will leave me with x minus 6y, and then in the second set, looks like I can factor out a y, so this becomes x minus 6y. So see, it all works out. So you just kind of keep that xy together, and the rest of it will kind of work its way through. And so then this will factor as 3x plus y, and then x minus 6y. So if you did trial and error, that's what your guess should have been. And now for the final one, so I've got -10x squared plus 19x minus 6. So the one thing that I have advocated for in other videos is when you have a negative here, personally, I just think it's nicer on your brain to factor that out. So I like to do this first. But if you don't care, oops, and then you flip all your signs. If you don't care about that, you don't have to do that, but I think that that just makes the problem nicer to work with. And now we just go through this as normal. So 10 times 6 is 60. So now what two things multiply to 60 but would add to -19? So as I think through this, let's see. 60 can be -5 times -12. So that's not going to work because -5 and 12 make -17. So what about, let's see, -3 times -20? That's definitely not going to work. What about -4 times -15? This will work, right? So -4 and -15. Okay, so let's go ahead and break this up. So I've still got this -1 here. Now this will be 10x squared minus 4x minus 15x plus 6. So I'm just going to carry this -1 through, and let's see. So I'm going to set up just an extra set of parentheses while I do the grouping here. So what can I factor out of these two terms? I can factor out 2x. So I'll factor out 2x, and that'll leave me with 5x minus 2. And then out of the second two terms, it looks like I can factor out a -3. So let's see, I'll factor out a -3, and that'll leave me with 5x minus 2. Just be careful with that minus sign. And so now I can finish my grouping here. So this will be -1 times 2x minus 3, and then 5x minus 2. Now what if you didn't factor out the -1? So that's fine. Then you would have one of these would have all their signs flipped. So equivalent ways you could have this would be -2x plus 3 times 5x minus 2, or you could leave the 2x minus 3 alone and have -5x plus 2. So basically you choose one of these to multiply the -1 and 2. So all three of these are equivalent answers. And so that wraps up this one, guys. So hopefully that was helpful to you. Any questions? You can always drop me a comment. I'm always reading. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.